Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Loki. Great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So if you don't know anything about me, I probably talked about it a little bit last season, but this episode really personifies what I love about science fiction and special time travel is the time travel shenanigans, the wackiness of it. Just like the timey-wiminess of time travel. So I love it that I'm curious, did they have this planned out last season? Probably not. It's probably something they figured out during the writing process of season between, writing season 2 was a whole conversation of, we find out the truth about Loki's circumstances. Because we've all been under the assumption after he got kicked through the time portal that Sylvie opened up in the season 1 finale that okay, he's in an alternate timeline where Kang is already conquered or whatever. And he's being chased by B-15 and Mobius, who don't know who he is. I love that whole thing. I thought for a second we were going to explore more on the outside of the TVA because he was stuck on this mail truck or whatever. But then it crash lands and he runs into Casey, but Casey has no idea who he is. But then he starts glitching out and then he ends up somewhere and you're like, what the hell? And then he's like, Casey's like, Loki? I'm like, wait, you know each other? I was like, wait, is he bouncing between two different timelines? Because once again, this is still under the impression that, hey, this is another timeline. But then Loki quickly figures out because the way they start talking about it, because like we see Mobius and B-15 are talking about what's happened with the timeline and everything. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? Because this is we eventually find the Mobius and B-15 that we know because we ultimately end up getting revealed that Loki is time traveling, time slipping, as they say, which should be possible in the TVA. But to be fair, it was a time. The time pad that was used was Kang's or He Who Remains. But it's like maybe he had a special one. I mean, so maybe he has. I mean, because he was at the end of time, so maybe his is retrofitted to be very special, and so it kind of breaks the rules of how things are supposed to be. Because, I mean, once again, a lot of stuff isn't supposed to work the way it works in the TVA. Because the Infinity Stones don't work there. Loki's magic doesn't work there. Yet him doing something that is supposed to be impossible in the TVA is happening. To be fair, that's because so many timelines are splintering. And it's basically having a massive, blowback effect on the TVA. But because then it starts opening up all these questions of, well, if he's been in the past, wait, how does it that Mobius and B-15 don't remember they met him? It's like, well, because they've repeatedly had their memories wiped. Who knows how long ago that was that he was in the past? It could be a thing of, that could be a situation where a version of He Who Remains was like, hey, I'm going to run this thing. But then he was like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. The fact of the matter is, I'm going to sit back and relax. Is that the same He Who Remains? Or was that a different variant that did that? And the one we met in season 1 is one that took over and then came up with the whole Timekeepers BS. You know? I'd assume for simplicity's sake, we're going to just assume that past where it's like, oh, there's a statue of He Who Remains. I'm going to assume it's the same one from season 1. I think for simplicity's sake, it's good because then you're going to have to be keeping track. I mean, to be fair, we're dealing with multiple variants of Kang. So it's like you're already going to be dealing with a lot. But I think for this show's sake, they're probably just going to be like, and that's the same person. So did he eventually go like, you know what? I'm tired of the whole conquering thing. So when he wiped everyone's memories, that's when he came up with the BS of the Timekeepers. Because what's also interesting too is that at some point in time Miss Minutes got involved. I don't know if he made Miss Minutes, because we still don't really know what her circumstances are at all. Loki did find this recording where he was talking about, oh, you're a Marvel, and I was like, oh, is he talking about Miss Minutes? But it's like, no, he's talking about Renslayer. Which now I'm curious, are we going to find out there's actually a connection between Miss Minutes and Renslayer? Probably reading too much into that, but I'm like, right, she's completely unaware of Miss Minutes, so what was going on last season, even she was caught off guard by, so that's why I was like, because it's like, oh, he thought you could use this, and Renslayer's like, who? And she's like, oh, don't worry about it. So, Renslayer and He Who Remains have met, but for whatever reason, he wiped her memory, because I don't remember if I talked about this last season, but it is something I know that people have talked about because, other people, I've listened to enough people who are more comic book savvy than I am, who talked about the fact is Renslayer in the comics is typically, I want to say it's Kang's girlfriend. I don't think it's He Who Remains, because in the comics, those are two separate characters. The MCU's just basically molded them into one character. But I want to say specifically him, she's Kang's lover in the comics, because I don't know if they've ever been married, so I don't want to just relegate her to girlfriend when maybe they've been like more than that. In any case, they've been lovers. So, but doing that to someone you love, well, to be fair, Renslayer could be a variant. I mean, as we see, she is a variant, so it could easily be. But I was like, nah, it's got to be. The thing is, maybe he needed her in her position because she's the person he trusts more than anyone in the world. Maybe it's something they agreed upon, and she was like, okay, when the time comes, I'll wipe your memory. Because we have no idea where she ended up after her confrontation with Mobius, and that was after Miss Minutes left her something that He Who Remains wanted her to have. So there's still a lot of mystery there that we haven't solved. I mean, at the forefront of it, it's like figuring out Loki's time slipping situation. Why is it that he's slipping in and out of time here at the TVA in particular? That's got to be the most annoying thing ever. While that's all happening, what is considered present day, Mobius and B-15 are dealing with having to report to the judges, which I guess they're all on the same equal footing as Renslayer. Like, I feel like she still answered to them specifically, but she was the one that interacted with the timekeeper, so maybe she's a higher position, and maybe they kind of answer under her, like maybe they're kind of like the second tier under her. I really don't understand that hierarchy. But there's the two different judges. One that's all about, no, we need to get back to pruning timelines. The other one's like, whoa, we need to take a beat. Because B-15 is like, we need to understand what's going on. We're all variants. We're all taken from the lives that we were supposed to lead. Like, everything that we've ever known is complete and other BS fabricated for whatever reason. And B-15's like, I'm not all about pruning timelines. I mean, it's like, we've genocided whole timelines. It's like, truth be told is you are. I mean, they have, because it's like, I mean, they at least believed it was for some sacred mission, but now realizing like, wait, we're variants too. The only reason why we're still alive is because we're being used in the same regard. We could easily be part of those timelines that got God. We're not the only versions of ourselves. We're just the only versions that were picked for this job. So it is kind of sickening knowing like it could have just as easily been another variant in your book. Because any timelines you've deleted could have easily just been you. And it's just a reminder of the life that you lead. Maybe that's why you're here, because your timeline no longer exists, you know? But I mean, if that was that's so interesting, because like, we've only met Renslayer timeline wise, because she's like one of her variants is a teacher, but like other than that, like B-15 hasn't run into a variant of herself. Mobius hasn't run into a variant of himself. So maybe the timelines therefrom no longer exist. So I wonder what or maybe it is just you don't know exactly where your variants are from what would be considered the sacred timeline, but maybe there is a Mobius and B-15 there that they just never met, but they met the at least one of Renslayer's it's complicated. And once again, that's going to be like, oh, this is going to give me, and I'm sure so many other people, a headache. Because the problem is with timey-wiminess stuff, I feel like, I don't know if it's necessarily confusing, because I feel like I have a grasp on it, but when I start speaking about it, that's when I kind of get a little tongue-tied, and I feel like I start overthinking it and overcomplicating things. So we'll see how that all plays out by the end of the season. But yeah. But I understand where B-15 is coming from. It's like I said, you at least believe like this is the right thing to do. Now finding out your variant it changes everything. It's like now you have to live with the fact is we've killed how many people, especially because we don't have our memories. Who knows how long we've been doing this for hundreds of years apparently, thanks to another character which we'll get to in a second. But it's like we've been doing this for a very, very long time. And every time we figure it out or something causes us to figure it out, it's like our memories get wiped. I can only assume that's why He Who Remains does that. Because it's like, why why else would you do that? Like, someone must figure it out at some point in time. Like, I wonder, is it kind of like almost like Good Place level of things of like, it's like spoilers for the Good Place, but the twist is like, hey, different people figured it out at a different time. And obviously it's like, really? Jason figured it out? Which is funny considering, like, I referenced The Good Place because the actor who plays Casey was in The Good Place. He played Jason's best friend, right? Jamila Jamil's in the MCU because she's Titania in She-Hulk. But then I also had to remember, all right, William Harper is also in the MCU because he was a character in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Either way, I kind of went on this whole tangent, but my point was just like the interesting thing of just like, right, who figures it out each time before their memories get wiped? Because, like, once again, what other reason would there be to wipe their memories? And I wonder, is that purely a Kang or He Who Remains decision, or is that a Miss Minutes decision? I mean, it's probably, like, even if it is Miss Minutes, it's on orders from, like, she follows suit because of, He Who Remains. But I brought this up earlier, but I want to go back to it really quickly since I'm referencing Miss Minutes. I brought up, like, the fact is, could she be like a technological consciousness of like a different version of Renslayer, a variant of Renslayer? That's why I was like, it's probably overthinking that. That's most likely not going to be the thing, but why else would she be? I mean, she could just be an ally who believes in what he does. She could be like a rogue AI. Because it had even been that situation. I mean, Loki even asked her, like, what was it, episode 2, like, of last season, are you alive or not? And she's like, yes and no. So don't know what the hell that is. So it could float in a situation that she's an AI consciousness based on someone else's consciousness. So there could be something where, like, she is like a variant of Renslayer or something. I don't know. She could just be her own thing that we're just kind of, it could just be a whole separate thing from Renslayer, which it most likely is, but Loki showing up and talking to Mobius about everything and explaining everything. He Who Remains, all the variants. Revealing like, you got this wall that's like got this tapestry of almost like, here's the timekeepers or whatever. Nope, it's BS. Let me prune this, and behind it is Kane. He just like basically painted over it with a new wallpaper to be like, this timekeepers BS. And Loki keeps like time slipping in front of him, and he's like, no, it's fine. Because Loki's like, yeah, it's fine. I don't feel anything. And Mobius is like, could you please? We gotta do something about that because it looks horrible. He's like, wait, I thought you said it looked fine. He's like, I lied to you. It's just, it looks horrible. It's like you're being born and dying at the same time. He's like, well, it feels fine. It's like, well, it doesn't look like it feels like. Hey, how did that look to you? And they turn to the lady in the elevator who doesn't say anything. She's just almost like, what am I supposed to say in this situation? It gives me the same vibes as that lady in the elevator with, in The Boys, and the lady in the elevator with Black Noir at the YourNerdGasm episode, where he like cuts open his tracker and hands it to her. She's like, thank you. It kind of gives me that same energy. It's like, I didn't want to get involved in this. I'm doing my job, whatever it is. I don't need you like, just like, I don't want to get caught up in whatever weird stuff this is. Because she's so traumatized. She's like, literally, they're on the far end of the other side of the elevator. And she's her in a corner being like, once again, doesn't even utter a word. But you see her mouth trying to be like, she just doesn't say anything. I love it. But they go to, what is it, RA to figure out something to kind of help out Loki's circumstances. And they meet Ouroboros, OB, played by Ki-Hu Kwan, which I was like, yeah. I mean, I already knew he was going to be in this season. I've actually avoided all the trailers, so I had no idea what to even begin suspecting for the season. I don't want to know, like, that's one again, I'm trying to go in as blind as possible into a lot of this stuff. But either way, but I'm so happy he's in the first episode because I'm like, oh, cool. So if we're introducing him this early, that means he's probably going to be, hopefully we get quite a bit of him throughout the season. Hopefully it isn't just a thing if he's sprinkled in here and there, but at the very least he's at the beginning. So I'd expect we'd get a lot of him throughout the season. But either way, he knows Mobius, but Mobius doesn't. I just love that. It's that awkward thing of, hey, Loki, this is, Yeah, yeah, Ouroboros, yeah, call him OB for short. It's like, yeah, oh, the last time I came here was 400 years ago. But then that immediately makes you go, wait, so Mobius doesn't remember, his memory's wiped, but why would OB's memory not be wiped? It's like, that doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, we see how integral he is to a lot of the mechanisms here in the time, the TVA, so maybe they felt like, well, someone else says, I've seen this kind of pop up online of like, maybe he can't be trusted then, because like if he doesn't have his memories like still stolen, like then maybe he shouldn't be trusted. Or maybe it's like it's necessary for him to keep his memories, because it's like you seem like you're so isolated. It feels like they give you busy work just to keep you busy and down there, and without, because it's like, right, in all this time you've never questioned it, you just stayed down below because you're like, oh, Mobius visited 400 years ago. No point did you pop upstairs at any point in time, because Mobius had come down here before because he had gotten lost. It's like that's interesting too, because I wonder, did 400 years ago lead to him figuring out things? Because it's like, why would he specifically not remember? Look, in that 400 years, he never accidentally stumbled down here again, which I think is so interesting. Like, you're bound to like randomly stumble across that place. I mean, you randomly ended up there at one point in time. Granted, we don't know. Maybe the first time he came down here, that was after 600 years of not finding his way down there. And now he's just going 400 years without going down there. But it just seems weird that in all that time, like 400 years, you've never been back down there, even by accident. So it must be that something down there must have been part of why maybe Mobius figured things out, and that started making things unravel. Which begs the question: why not just get rid of Mobius if anyone ever becomes an issue? Why not just remove them from the board? I mean, I guess it's like, you're good at what you do, you're useful, I need you, so I might as well take advantage of it and just wipe your memories. Because I'm curious. I was almost thinking too, God, what is that series I'm thinking of? I'm blanking on it. There is a series where it's like, oh, Legends of Tomorrow. Once again, it's one of my favorite things about Legends of Tomorrow. Why were these particular characters chosen? Because you have the least impact on the timeline. These might be variants, but they don't have any drastic variations on the timeline. Once again, their timelines probably end up getting deleted, but even if they don't, you're not significant enough for it to matter. So maybe that's why it's kind of like, why go through the trouble? You're already kind of like, you've proven yourself useful over the years, so I might as well keep you around. Or is it just because you literally have no value outside of that, and I've given you value, kind of almost on some high evolutionary status? I'm referencing that because I just saw the movie today at the time of recording this, so I'm curious if it's kind of how that all plays out. Once again, I'm probably attributing and overthinking a lot of it, but it gives you a lot to think about. And maybe that's just, once again, me just being me and overanalyzing everything. But I did love how OB, which very interesting name, Ouroboros, stemming from the serpent eating its own tail, because that obviously gets used quite a bit when it comes to time stuff. So the fact is, that's a very interesting name for him to get. So maybe he's an OG when it comes to this. Maybe Ouroboros is the first person that was ever taken for the TVA. Who knows? But having such a very specific name and something related to time travel, it feels like it's got to all be connected. Because that's the whole point of like the Ouroboros, like of a snake eating its own tail, is that it's supposed to be a situation of like, timeline wise, it's like, okay, everything happens for a reason. It's all meant to loop, which then kind of makes you think about this episode where you're like, okay, so obviously Loki ran into Hunter, B-15 and Mobius, but they don't remember because his memories were wiped. But then it's like, was that always supposed to happen? Because it's not like Loki's in a new timeline. He's in the same timeline. He just went to the past and eventually the future of that timeline. But it's like, so is this supposed to be one of those timey-wimey things of like, it always happened? Because he'd even asked Casey, he's like, was that crack always there? And he was like, yeah, it was. And it's like, well, was it? So is it things of like, yeah, this timeline, I mean, it is changing, because when he goes back in time and meets OB, quote unquote, present day OB is like, oh, I actually did meet a guy named Loki all those years ago. And it's like, yeah. So, And I love how that was done. And it's like, okay, so I'm time slipping. It's like, oh, so now that QB has met him present day, but now all of a sudden, I keep saying QB, OB. I almost want to just keep saying Ouroboros because if I shorten it, for whatever reason, I'm always going to shorten it to QB, like quarterback. I don't know why. I'm not a sports guy. I'm not a football person. American football, let me specify. I'm not even a soccer person on it, either. So, but I'm like, Ouroboros, like the fact is that for him, it's like, that's interesting. I all of a sudden remember him. So it's like, yeah, time slipping is a thing because a guy came in here a long time ago asking about it. And it's like, no, now I recognize that guy was Loki. Funny. And it's like, I love that Loki's trying to explain that to past him, who's like, oh, that's interesting. But he's also like, that's not possible. But it's like, if it was possible, how would we rectify that? It's like, well, basically, you would have to prune yourself at the same time that Mobius would have to put himself in a situation where he'd end up getting skinned alive. And I love when they finally do pop back, when Loki finally pops back into place, present day. It's like, man, they both would give up to have the other situation. It's like, you're pruning yourself. He's like, yeah, but if I prune myself, I could literally fall out of existence. You'll just be skinless. It's like, how is that preferable? It's like, yeah, but at least even if you're skinless, at least you're still alive. He's like, what kind of living is that, being skinless? So it's like, do we really have to do this? Is there any other way? And so they go to the loom, and I love that there's dust on it because like they haven't been there for a long time because I think OB said that like he comes up with like the mechanics of it, but like the more machinery side of things, but the whole concept and everything was something Miss Minutes came to him about. So, but the place is dusty, and I love that you see Mobius like writing skin ? In the side of one of the computers, and it's just kind of like oh boy, that we really have to do this. Because the whole point is we find out the reason why the TVA is in the situation it is, the lights are flickering, is because the time loom, is that what it was called? Basically, it absorbs time and it like streams it down to one single timeline. And that's why it's able to, like, it's always been stabilized because of that. But because of all these multiple timelines bridging into it, it's overloading the system and it's backlashing against the TVA. So Loki has to take this time. It's now or never. He has to prune himself at the right time, or, so that he pops out of time. And in that moment, they can reel him in, because they have to close down the doors or whatever to protect the TVA from the expanding timeline and stuff. I'm a little hazy on those specific details of how they. It's like they're bringing down some shield barriers that will help them block out the time effects of the multiple timelines and everything until they can rectify it and modify the TVA and make it so that it's adjustable to absorb and be able to handle that multiple timeline output. Problem is that Loki finds himself in the future, which I thought was interesting. I mean, he finds himself maybe a minute or two into the future, because he's supposed to have 5 minutes. So I was like, all right, I got to find the prune stick, because sadly, Mobius took it with him, so it's like, cool, I'm a couple minutes into the future. That's super inconvenient. Trying to find a prune stick, everyone's kind of running wild and crazy because of everything. Well, it might not be a few minutes into the future. It's definitely further in the future, because the place is still running amok, but because he didn't find Mobius. So it had to be much further in the future, because he ends up running into Sylvie there, and because she's opening a door, and there's a phone ringing, and all of a sudden he gets pruned. I'm assuming that's a future Loki pruned him. It's okay, our Loki at some point in the future, it's oh yeah, at some point I'm going to pop up here. Let me prune myself so I can snap back to present day and get rid of my time slipping. So once again, the Ouroboros eating its own tail of okay, this has to happen so that I can be back here to help my past self get back to present day. Timey-wiminess. Love it. Because she did say oh, there you are. Because he's looking for a second, what? And then all of a sudden he gets pruned. So I'm assuming, I could be mistaken. So either that's going to be my money is on it's our Loki, but from the future, whatever future point that is in time. It's Loki at that point. At that point, it's present for him, but obviously for the Loki we're following right now, it's the future. That's going to be complicated. Like I said, my words are severely complicating it. Mobius was worried that Loki wasn't going to make it, and even OB is like, oh, Mobius isn't going to make it back inside. Luckily, they crash into each other and bam, made it inside. Now it's like, cool, we got to find Sylvie because now she's being hunted by everyone because one of the judges Hunter X5 after her. Because she's very stuck in a way of like, well, if this is how things are going to be, then we're going to have to prune the timelines. We might as well at the very least, capture Sylvie because she's the one that kind of started all this by killing He Who Remains at the end of last season. So she's going to be the one that kind of give us definitive answers about everything that went down. But even then, B-15 and B-90 are like, wait, why are they armed to the gills? This isn't just about Sylvie. I wonder, is it Renslayer the only one that's kind of tied? Renslayer and Miss Minutes, maybe they're not the only ones here at the TVA that are directly tied to He Who Remains / Kang, but it could also just be a thing of, well, it could just be as easy a thing of she's actually just so stubborn of like, we've been doing this for so long and the only way we can reign into chaos because we're the only line of defense between order and chaos is to go back to doing things that way of pruning timelines. So maybe it's the thing of removing Sylvie because she's such an issue and reigning in the timelines. Who knows? But we do catch up with Sylvie. She's in 1982 Oklahoma. So I'm assuming she went there direct. I guess that's maybe directly after she killed He Who Remains. And she shows up at a restaurant. She's looking at these different people because I think for the first time in her life, she feels like her life is kind of in her own control. So it's like, right, I'll take everything. I don't know if seeing all that was making her think about Loki or what. Because it's like, or maybe it's just like, making her think about Loki. Or maybe thinking about the family, just the life that she could have led, the life she had or could have had. And maybe it's just everything. I want to taste what life is. I'm not on the run anymore. I don't have to hide in apocalypses. I've set everyone and everything free and I've set myself free in the process of this manipulation of following someone else's script for so long. That's how I see it. But we'll have to wait to see and to get some answers on that. I am curious, will this tie in any shape or form to Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania? Because we've kind of all assumed, like, we know there's all those other variants out there. We got them at the end of the movie, but are we sure we got rid of Kang the Conqueror? Like, it's kind of like he's dead, but maybe he's trapped, and this series will tie into that. Maybe not. Maybe it's like that particular variant is removed from the board. He was the one that was kind of set up to be the actual Kang the Conqueror, the worst of the worst. And it's like, did we really just beat him? To be fair, once again, they changed that ending like right up until the very end. So that ending was a lot more, hey, everything's okay than it was supposed to be because it was supposed to be a much darker, sadder, depressing ending. So who knows? We'll ultimately have to wait and see how this all plays out. I'm assuming this season 6 episodes like the first one. So very excited to have Loki back. I'm so intrigued to see how the season plays out, where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.